Edward was happy to be running again after a long time. His driver and fireman had been considerate to arrange his now regular timetables with Sir Charles Hatt, the Fat Director, though they were careful not to push Edward to his limits, given his age. As the days passed, all of the engines had given Edward their full support. All except two, Gordely and another big blue tender engine. This engine had no name, only his number, 98462. Along with Gordon, 98462 had been brought to the railway on trial, and although he and Gordon had a great deal in common, both being boastful and cocky, 98462 never seemed to know when enough was enough. One evening, Edward came into the sheds after taking his last passenger run of the day, feeling quite proud. You finally managed to make it out at the station, sniffed 98462. I've never known an engine like you be so useless, Edward. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot of complaints from the passengers tomorrow. You must have been behind time all day. Thomas and Henry gave 98462 a foul look, but Edward just smiled. Actually, he chuckled, we were right on time. I'm happy to be feeling useful again. The passengers seemed to agree. Edward knew if he did not let 98462's remarks bother him, the engine wouldn't berate him for long, and soon enough, having given up on getting any sort of reaction out of Edward, he drifted off to sleep. With Edward now running passenger trains more regularly, the Fat Director had extended the timetable to run later into the evening. This meant that Edward, Gordon and 98462 would now be running the island's main passenger services. Edward had his doubts, but he was determined to work his hardest. Fortunately for him, he ran the loop line, so he only saw the two big blue engines at the junction. But as the weeks passed, Edward began to feel tired. He thought his trains were getting heavier, or that his age was beginning to show. Thomas and Henry noticed this. Can we be of any help? Asked Henry kindly. We are a little worried about you. No thank you, puffed Edward. You have your own trains to manage. We can't upset the Fat Director's timetable. Little did the engines know. 98462 had been listening and had started making a plan. The next morning, Edward puffed into the big station to collect his first train of the day, but he couldn't see his coaches at any of the platforms. Thomas was to woke it up late again, he thought. But before he could think of anything else, 98462 came puffing into the platform, with Edward's coaches coupled to his own. Edward couldn't believe his eyes. No need to fret, 98462 puffed smoothly. I'll be taking your train today. After all, given your state, we can't upset the Fat Director's timetable. And before Edward could say another word, the guard's whistle blew, and the sound of 98462's cackled laughter drowned his puffs as he steamed out of the station. Just as Thomas arrived, he had seen everything. You shouldn't let him cheat like this, Edward. It's not doing you any good. Even Gordon never goes this far, he huffed. Why don't you speak to the Fat Director about it? It's not worth it, Thomas, Edward interrupted. It's best we just get on with our work. And Edward puffed away, leaving a completely distraught Thomas with much to think about. 98462's relentless taunting towards Edward's children when, much to the disapproval of the other engines. Though he couldn't care less, and kept on taking Edward's jobs as often as he could, leaving Edward very depressed. It didn't help one morning that he was feeling unwell as he tried to work around the yard. "What did I tell you?" sniffed 98462. "A pathetic excuse for an engine. Why keep him around when all he does is get in the way?" Thomas had had enough. "Edward helped build these rails that you're standing on," he fumed. "Without him, none of us would be standing here, including yourself." "Just a thing of the past," 98462 interjected, determined to make himself brutally clear. "Us bigger engines come faster, stronger, and more up-to-date than that, Orion," and was steamed away, leaving the others speechless. Edward sighed. He decided it was time to take a stand against 98462, but he didn't know how. The next morning, Edward woke up earlier than usual to collect his coaches, in an attempt to make it to the platform before 98462. The yard was silent. Edward was sure he had beaten him. "And just what," said a voice suddenly, "do you think you're doing?" 98462 puffed up quickly alongside Edward. Edward, in shock, tried to sound as firm as he could. "Collecting my coaches for my passenger train," he said. "I don't think so," growled 98462. "The place for old scrap irons like you is in the sheds, where you can be waiting to be sent away, or better yet, scrapped. Now, kindly move yourself away from my coaches." Edward, in a depressed state of defeat, did so. "And just what do you think you are doing?" bellowed a familiar voice. The fat director strode down from the signal box. He had seen everything. "I will not stand for this behavior," he said crossly. "Given fellow workers have informed me about your treatment towards fellow engines. Furthermore, about several passenger complaints about uncomfortable journeys and being taken to the wrong stations." 98462's face went pale. "Engines are my railway," the fat director went on. "Work hard and help others. You'll show very little consideration in doing either of those things. Having brought you here on trial is clear from my point of view. You are unfit for my railway. You shall go back home to the other railway tonight. But until then, you shall return to the shed at once." 98462 couldn't muster up a response. He glared at Edward as he sulked back to the sheds. The fat director turned to Edward. "You're one of my engines, Edward," he began, "and you must understand this. You might not think so, but you are not alone on this railway. If you need to talk, or you have any other problems, you must come and see me right away. Understand?" Edward could see from the smile on the fat director's face that he had been told everything. He looked across the yard and saw Henry and Thomas smiling back. "Now," finished the fat director, "you have a change to pull. Afterwards, I would like you to have a long rest." "Well, thank you ever so much, sir," sighed Edward. And as he set off, he felt his position on the railway secure, and had no more troubles from then on. That was until Gordon. But I shan't say any more, or I shall spoil the next story.